Welcome to our weekday reflection this Monday, the 11th of August, and I'm reading from Mark's Gospel, chapter 4, verse 35. That day, when evening came, he said to his disciples, "Let us go over to the other side." Leaving the crowd behind, they took him just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat, so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" He got up and rebuked the wind and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." Then the wind died down and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, "Why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith?" And today I just want to reflect upon the statement of the disciples, "Teacher, do you not care if we drown?" Because I suspect that for many of us, we're feeling that way right now in the midst of COVID-19. God, do you not care if we drown? But also the statement of Jesus, do you still have no faith? There's an apocryphal story that I once heard about a man who sprained his ankle and made an appointment to see his local doctor. When he arrived at the surgery, he went up to the receptionist to confirm his appointment. And the receptionist looked up, passed him a number and said, "Straight down the hall, first door on the right, and strip down to your underwear." The man was a little bit surprised by this instruction and replied, "I just sprained my ankle." Without even looking up, the receptionist again repeated the instructions. Down the hall, first door on the right, strip down to your underwear. "I don't see why I need to strip down to my underwear to have a doctor examine a sprained ankle," exclaimed the man. The receptionist looked up at the man with a penetrating stare that sent a shiver down his spine. Angrily, she pointed, "Down the hall, first door on the right, strip down to your underwear." Not wanting to argue any further with the receptionist, the man hobbled off down the hallway, opened the first door on his right and entered, where he saw another man sitting there shivering in his boxer shorts. "Boy," exclaimed the man, "that receptionist sure is something. I have simply sprained my ankle and yet she insisted I come down here and strip down to my underwear." "You think that's bad?" responded the man in the boxer shorts. "I'm just the delivery man." There are times in our lives when I suspect that we feel like that we're not in control of our own lives, that other people are telling us what we can do and when we can do it, especially in our present situation, that there's no control over our lives or our circumstances. And we are feeling in this difficult time of lockdown and curfew that we are reliant day upon day upon the most recent government announcement of what we can or can't do, wondering if it's ever going to end. And this time of waiting is particularly difficult, I suspect, for those of us who have become accustomed to a culture of fast service, of quick fixes, of instant answers. We're not used to waiting. And as a general rule, we're not very patient. And yet times of waiting can be extraordinary opportunities for us to grow and develop in our relationship with God. Abraham had to wait 25 years before God fulfilled his promise to him. Joseph had to wait years before he eventually rose to a position of power and authority and influence within Egypt, whereby he could save his family and Israel's future. Sold by his brothers into slavery, falsely imprisoned, he certainly had a stormy life. Times when he thought that he was going to drown. Times when his faith was tested. And when he probably wondered whether God was actually with him. And yet every time he had difficulty, we read these words, God was with Joseph. God was with him. In these difficult times, even though it may appear that God's asleep and not answering our prayers, God is with us. And we can take comfort in the fact that we are not alone. The Lord is with us. And if God is with us, who can be against us? Lloyd Douglas, the author of the book The Robe and The Big Fisherman, wrote that when he was living in a boarding house in Wittenberg University, there was a wheelchair-bound music professor residing on the first floor. And every morning, Douglas wrote that he would stick his head in the professor's door and say, "What's the good news?" The elderly man would tap his tuning fork on his wheelchair and say, "That's middle C. It was middle C yesterday, it's middle C today, it will be middle C tomorrow. In 1,000 years, it will still be middle C. The tenor upstairs sings flat and the piano across the hall needs tuning. But that, my friend, is middle C." We all need the stability of a middle C in our lives. We are currently surrounded by change. Change in our freedom of movement. Change in our work environments. Change in our income and job security. Change even in the way in which we can relate to other people. But no matter how much change there is, middle C is still middle C. And the one who rules over the universe and watches over it is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. King David wrote in Psalm 90 verse 2, "From everlasting to everlasting, you are God." And the way in which we deal with the storms of life is testimony to our faith. The words of Jesus, do you still have no faith? No matter who we are or what we do, the storms of life will come and they will threaten to sink us. But we need to have faith. See, counsellors may provide comfort and support in the midst of the storm. But what we really need is the God who can still the storm. Friends may be present to hold our hands in times of crisis. But what we really need is the God who can provide a peace that truly passes all understanding and passes our understanding. Family can sit by our bedside, or by our deathbed. But what we really need is the God who has conquered the grave. We need one who has flung 100 billion stars and their orbiting planets into space. A God so mighty and yet so gentle that he comes and he reveals himself in the person of Jesus Christ and says, "Don't be afraid. Where is your faith? I'm with you." Henry Francis Lyte wrote the wonderful words of the great hymn, "Abide with me. Abide with me, fast falls the eventide. The darkness deepens, Lord. Lord, with me abide. When other helpers fail and comforts flee, help of the helpless, oh, abide with me." We need to say those words. And then Henry Lyte goes on to say, "Earth's joys grow dim, its glories pass away, change and decay all around I see. O thou who changest not, abide with me." So today may it be our prayer that God might still the raging storms that are going on in our lives at this time. That he might grant us the faith to know that middle C will always be middle C. And that God changes not. And the God who changes not is with us if only we have faith. Abide with me. Abide with me. Well, thanks for joining me today for this reflection, and I look forward to seeing you again on Wednesday for our next reflection.